Hey, Bob.
Hey, how you doing, Tyler?
Good morning or early.
And it is 5:03
or late
a.m.
night. So,
I'm ready. How about you?
oh, I'm ready. Are you sure you want to do this? I mean,
Well, we're kind of into it right now.
You remember what happened last time, right?
Well, I do remember what happened last time, but I do have a really good feeling about it.
Yeah.
We got a new transmission. We do have a few other little issues, but nothing that'll stop us, I don't think.
All
So,
right.
what the heck? Let's give it a shot.
Dang it.
Well, we're on our way to Colorado. We left at 5 this morning, and as you can see, the sun's coming up. It's going to be a beautiful day. In fact, the 4-day trip is projected to have just great weather. So what we're going to do is a situation report periodically, and situation is great right now. As you're aware of, the last attempt that we took to do this trip a couple weeks ago, the transmission did not cooperate. It was not happy at all, and we had to give it up after about 70 miles. Had the transmission rebuilt, and this thing is it's humming like a watch. We're cruising at 75 miles an hour. The coolant and oil temperatures are perfect, 65 psi oil pressure, and it's getting, according to my little vintage computer here, averaging 20.1 miles per gallon. So it's really, really happy. Now, as far as the mission is concerned, I'm going to divulge exactly what this is about. We're going to go to Colorado to climb Pikes Peak. Now, the reason for that is that these cars, under those circumstances, have a tendency to overheat and misbehave in some pretty unfortunate ways. So what we're going to do is go there and see what the oil temperatures do. More on that later. It's kind of a challenge to go up Pikes Peak. I was out here in May to sort of do a recon mission in a rental car, and on the way up there was a couple cars parked off the side of the road. And we're doing it in a mid-80s V12 powered GT car. We'll be fine. All right. Now, you may have noticed that Tony isn't along on this trip. Well, he's got one of those things they call a job. And so he can't make it out on Thursday and Friday. He had to work. So what he's going to do is hop a cheap flight out to Denver, and he's going to meet us out there. And we'll climb the mountain, drive around the central part of Colorado for a while, and then he'll come home with us. So that's the game plan. As we cruise across western Iowa at a safe and prudent speed, a bit above the speed limit, this would be a good time, I think, to discuss that black box that is on the cowl of the car just outside of the windshield. Now, what that is a master set of gauges, and there's a couple of purposes to that. First of all, the one on the left, that's coolant temperature, which is about 190 degrees. One in the middle is oil temperature, which is just about the same, probably 185 degrees. And the one on the right is oil pressure, which currently is showing 65. Now that right there tells me that this engine is in its happy space. Your coolant temperature and your oil temperature should be in general agreement. The problem arises if you start to see the oil temperature climb higher relative to the coolant temperature. And that's one of the reasons why we're going to Pikes Peak, because one of the first times that I was aware that there was something weird going on in these engines was when I was climbing up the Beartooth Pass road in Montana, and I got out of the car, coolant temperature was fine, and then about 5 minutes later it started blowing all of its coolant all over the place. So what we're doing here basically is documenting what actually is going on. In that case, what happened was oil temperature was going through the roof, probably 280, 300 degrees, and all that heat soaked up into the heads and blew the coolant out. So that's one reason why we're taking this set along. The other thing is that it's always a really good idea, particularly with these cars, because these gauges are often referred to as comedy gauges, to know exactly what those numbers on the instrument panel reads. Now, if you can look on the master gauges, we got 190 degrees roughly. Down here, we've got an overly optimistic view of temperature, which is somewhat cooler than that, which is not a really good thing either, because you want the engine to run its most efficient, and that is what happens at a certain temperature. You can see that the oil pressure on this gauge is about 60, which is in agreement with what we got out there in the hood. The fuel gauge shows empty, but if I look at my computer, I've only used 16.38 gallons, which means I've got roughly 6 gallons left before I chug to a stop on the side of the road. And of course, you got an ammeter or a voltmeter here, which is showing perfect. So that's what we're going to be watching as we go up Pikes Peak. See what happens to the oil temperature, particularly as we get to the top, where the grade increases and we have to shift down to a lower gear. RPMs go up, and temperature of the oil is largely driven by RPMs. So this just isn't a joyride we're taking here. This is serious scientific stuff.
Jamendo.com.
Okay, Bob, so you remember the first episode we ever shot, besides the episode where you talk about all the episodes we're going to shoot?
Yeah.
Did you ever think that when you grabbed the Texas XJS Ol Tex that you were going to be driving into Colorado and climbing up Pikes Peak? Was that ever the idea?
Well, the thing about Pikes Peak has been a relatively recent decision. So the initial plan was to purchase it as a parts car with the intention of, first of all, seeing if we could get the thing running, if it was worth anything. Because it sounded like the only reason that the car hadn't been run for the past few years was some rodent got under the hood and ate all the wires. And when I got down there and got a look at it, that was in fact the case. So I was hopeful that the engine was still in reasonably good shape. And we found that not to be the case, but so, you know, what's the downside? If it's not a decent car, you've got a rich source of used Jaguar XJS parts. But I don't know, this thing just sort of grew on me over time, and eventually I got to the point where I thought, you know what, even after we discovered the engine was bad, I got enough spare parts around here, used parts and so forth, that I might be able to put together a decent engine for this thing. And that was what spawned the idea of the $100 Jaguar V12 overhaul challenge. And we all kind of know how that deal went, because of the fact that this thing was just a nightmare electrically. For those of you that don't know, the engine locked up because we spun it too much over time, even though I transfused oil into it to try to minimize that probability. About the time we got all the wiring issues solved, the engine locked up. So no, there was really at no point where I thought that this was going to turn out to be a great car. It might be fun to get it running and run it around the street a little bit, but you know, lately it's gotten to the point where, you know what, once we got this second engine going, this is going to be a pretty good car. I'll tell you what, right now we're cruising across Nebraska, near Kearney, at a safe and prudent speed, somewhat above the speed limit. And no, I never thought that this car would be this good. It grew on me over time, but I never thought it would be this good. Now, to be honest, we're only 500 miles into this trip, but I'm feeling good. I mean, this is, I don't know if a new car drives this good ride-wise, and to answer your question, no, but yes.
What does it take for you to get attached to a car?
The thing about cars is that, well, for a guy like me, I tend to anthropomorphize mechanical things.
You want to explain to
Google
the audience what that means?
Google that. Now, anthropomorphize is to ascribe human qualities to things that aren't human. This car right here. Now, I know I say that every car that I drive is my favorite car, but my plan is, assuming that this thing goes the way that it is now for the rest of the weekend, my plan is to get this car out and have some adventures with it. You know, and this is the start of it. If we make it up Pikes Peak, that's going to be a pretty amazing thing, because that's a hard thing for even a new car. So yeah, it's for me, it's about the experiences, and in fact, if you remember what this car looks like on the outside, it's kind of rough. The paint's real chalky. In fact, we've used it as a chalkboard in one of the episodes.
I was actually going to ask you, would you ever stop using it as a chalkboard and actually give it a paint job?
You know, I've thought about that, because I've been asked, you know, when are you going to paint the thing? You know, what point in the process? And, you know, I'm not sure that I'm in a real big hurry to paint it. Because
it makes a good chalkboard?
Well, you know, that's kind of the funny thing about it, you know, maybe, I don't know, but the point is that I've gotten to the stage in my life where I really don't care much about what other people think, about what I have, what I drive, and that sort of thing. I drive these cars for what I'm doing right now, just driving across Nebraska at the speed I am in perfect comfort, and know that I put a lot of time and effort into this thing, and it's really panning out. I don't know that anyone else would have put this kind of time and effort and money in a car like this, but I did, and I just kind of like to do this stuff. So, you know, as far as painting it is concerned, I kind of like it the way it is. it displays pretty clearly where it's from. It's been sitting out in the sun, not being used for a long time, and we got it running. So that's as far as I go with trying to impress people with what I drive.
Does riding on it bring you back to your teaching days?
Okay, well, the truth of the matter is, when I started teaching in the late 70s, there were no chalkboards.
What did they use?
They used whiteboards with board markers.
Really?
Yeah, every school that I've taught
modern.
in. Oh yeah.
Back in the 70s, that was
the dry erase marker.
80s, 90s thing.
The dry erase marker is not a recent phenomenon.
If, let's say we don't make it up Pikes Peak, what's that going to do for you?
Negative vibes.
Is that like
the way we don't make it up Pikes Peak is if something breaks and we have to put it on the hook to get it home. I think we'll make it. If we don't, if something does break, that is going to be a major disappointment. But you know, I used to fly radio control model airplanes back a long time ago. And while a crash with a balsa wood airplane was always a negative thing, it didn't take me long to, unless it was a total wreck, didn't take me long to summon up the attitude that, you know what, this is a great opportunity to make the changes that I wanted to make. So.
Would you ever leave it in Colorado?
No, it only, you know, $800 is probably what it would cost to get it back. But it's an $800 parts car at that point. I mean, there's a lot of good parts in this thing. So I don't know, that may be pathological, right. A pathological response.
Right.
I don't want to give it away.
Right.
Jamendo.com.
Well, that was a long one, about 13 hours. But Ol Tex never skipped a beat all the way. Temperatures bang on, cruised minimum of 75 miles an hour. In some cases where we thought we could get rid of it, 85, maybe a little more. But very, very good. I'm really, really pleased. So the plan is tomorrow we're going to go to Pikes Peak and we're going to do a recon mission, see where we're going to shoot video and also sort of get the lay of the land, which is pretty much vertical. And then the following day, Tony flies in tomorrow night, and then the following day we take Ol Tex up the hill, see how he does. I think it's going to be a challenge. We also have to remember we have to drive him home. So we need to establish some parameters here. So, but anyway, we'll do that over dinner, breakfast, whatever the next meal I decide to eat. I'm going to bed. Good night.